Let's look at the psychological profile of all police. Blanket statement. All of them. Every single one of them fall into two categories. Unless and until they quit their cult. Let me say that again. All active police, all blanket statement. Get as offended as you want. Nothing will ever make it untrue. It's a true blanket statement. Every single police officer in the history of humanity for all time. These are their psychological characteristics. They can be broken down into two simple categories. I would say most of them, or actually really all of them, fit into the first category. And then you have that special brand that is in the second category, the psychopaths. The real, either born or secondary conditioned psychopaths. It doesn't really matter. They behave the same way. But we have that special brand that is a small percentage that then influences the whole and makes the whole batch rotten to the core. The saying is not, it's just a couple of bad apples. The saying is, one bad apple spoils the bunch. Get that through your fucking skulls. Dumb people who don't even understand how to relate a little, saying to make a moral point. It's just some bad apples. Wrong, incorrect. The saying is, one rotten apple spoils the bunch. Okay? Look it up and understand what it really is before drooling diarrhea out your mouth and saying, well, it's just some bad apples. Because you sound like some dumb, caveman who a boulder fell on his cerebral cortex and you can't even speak. That's what you sound like. Dumb dunces. Okay? And I'm tired of hearing it from people. Psychopaths gravitate toward the institution of policing, toward the institution of control over others, regardless of what it may be. This happens in the medical field. This happens in banking. It happens in any institution that has any control over people's lives because these people have God complexes. Psychological God complexes. The psychopaths are who I'm really talking about here. But true blanket statement, whether you like it or agree with it or not, eternally true, all police psychology can be broken into two categories. With no exception, ever. Order followers and psychopaths. Every cop that is active duty is one form or another in psychological makeup and characteristics. Get as offended by that blanket statement as you like. Your offense to it will never make it untrue. So let's look at the psychological characteristics of both of these groups of human trash. Order followers have an extreme lack of holistic intelligence regardless of their intelligence quotient as measuring pure intellect. Most order followers on the police force have low IQ. Some of them, like detectives, might have a higher IQ, but all of them, blanket statement, lack holistic intelligence. Extreme lack of holistic intelligence. That means that they do not have heart-based intelligence. They do not have true emotional intelligence. They do not have true moral intelligence, because if they did, they would not gravitate toward the profession of control over others. And they would not have the low holistic intelligence of not understanding why the very institution of police is immoral from its foundations on its face. If they had true holistic intelligence, they would understand that this is not a way to solve the problem of immoral behavior in our society to begin with. They are people who have such low true intelligence factors that they cannot logically and morally come to the accurate conclusion of what causes immoral behavior and how to deal with and solve the problem of immoral behavior. That is their childish psychological mindset, first and foremost. In other words, to put it very simply, they're dumb people. No matter how smart they think they are, no matter how clever they think they are, they're dumb holistically. They're holistically dumb. Once again, bring any police officer in front of me. I will tell them to their face, you can think you're intelligent all you want. You can have a high IQ as measures in today's IQ testing intellect. My IQ as measured by intellect quotient tests is 147. That's considered a genius, and that is considered less than, far less, actually about 0.5% of the whole human population has an IQ of that value or higher. About 0.05% of the whole human population has an IQ of 147 or greater, which is the last time my IQ was measured years ago, measured 147. I'm not bragging about that. I'm just telling you, I don't consider that a measure of my holistic intelligence. That's just my intellect quotient. It shouldn't be called intelligence quotient. It should be called intellect quotient. My intellect for pure logic, mathematics, science, etc. is about 147. That's not my holistic intelligence, because holistic intelligence does not just measure left brain intellect. It would measure heart-based intelligence, and you really can't measure that with a test. Natural law is written on the heart. Morality is written on the heart. It's not written in left brain verbiage. It's not measured through words or testing or instruments. It's measured in the heart and what we know to be true regarding objective morality. So these people don't have that form of intelligence. They're not philosophers. They're not people who want to study morality in depth. They've bought the bullshit illusion of morality as put forward to them by the institution called government, which is a huge crock of shit lie. And it's a cult belief system. So, holistically, they're dumb people. They attempt to abdicate their own personal responsibility to discover what objective morality is, or in other words, which actions are moral and which actions are immoral. They don't want to do that for themselves. They want to be told by government and by politicians what that is, and then they want to enforce those dictates, those man-made dictates, not the actual laws of the universe, the true spiritual laws of morality of creation. They're very little concerned with what those spiritual laws of creation in fact are. All they care about is the dictates of mankind, who think that they're God, of the subset of mankind called government that thinks it's God here. Oh, and they'll enforce and obey their dictates, but will they look into what real objective morality is? Not a fucking moment. Not for a fucking moment. And then they think they're moral human beings. You're scumbag fucking trash. There's nothing moral about you. If you quit your cult, you're on the path to becoming moral. They want to be told what to do. They don't want to discover how to behave. They want to be told what to do by perceived quote-unquote superiors. Because again, these are psychological little infants who never grew up. They don't want the responsibility of truly growing up as a true, holistically intelligent, spiritually awakened human being. They want to be told what to do by their perceived superiors, like a little fucking child in diapers. It wants direction from their parents. And that's what the government and the parties of government are. It's daddy and mommy, left brain and right brain, you know, controller and nurturer. That's all it is. Psychological proxy parents. And that's who they want to give over their behavior to. They want to abdicate their personal responsibility to choose moral behavior based on knowledge, which is conscience. And they just want to abdicate that to someone else who they think they just know better and they made the law and we just enforce it. No, you're just an order follower who doesn't give a shit about what's truly right or wrong, and you want to be told what to do because you're a fucking little child inside your psychology. You have a total childish psychological makeup, and you never grew up into a true adult human being in consciousness and in your internal psychological makeup, regardless of your physical age. And no one's ever told you that because you never had any real parenting or mentoring. And you've been deceived your whole fucking life, and you've run with the fucking deception because you don't want to acknowledge that you were duped and you were too stupid to figure it out. They have a internal psychological desire to please their superiors because their superiors are seen as their psychological proxy parents, as I've just explained. That's why there's only ever two political parties. One political party, usually the right-wing one, represents daddy, that is the protector and father figure, and then the left-wing party is usually the mother figure, which is the nurturer and provider from cradle to grave, the nanny. You know, that's all it is. And people still can't see it. They can't see how they are proxy parents psychologically for people who never grew up and outgrew the need for psychological parenting. Because they never did any internal work upon themselves psychologically and spiritually. This is why people think people need to be controlled and think that they have to jump into the position of controlling them. That's not an adult psychological point of view. That's the point of view of a fucking child who never grew up inside of themselves. And nobody will just say it plainly and truly just like that because they're afraid of hurting other people's feelings. Fuck your feelings. We don't have time left to worry about how your feelings go, child. Children aren't going to dictate what my rights and freedom are. They're not going to dictate what other free people's and true psychologically advanced and grown up and spiritually awakened people's rights and freedoms are. Not without physical consequence. You'll find out what a child you are and what it's going to lead to, boy and girl. Don't worry about it. You'll find out. It's getting there. It's getting there. And trust me, when it comes, everybody's not going to like it. It's not going to like the result you get. I've been trying to avert it for 227 fucking episodes of doing this shit. I've been trying to avert that eventuality and the reality that's going to manifest itself in our world. I think we're long past the ability to even hold it back, quite frankly, and I think it's going to emerge into horrendous, horrific bloodshed, the likes of which this planet has never before seen and is likely to never see again. And you know what? You know whose fault and responsibility it is? Because blame is real, blame is true. Too few people look at moral culpability. Too few people acknowledge and engage in the dynamic of blame, of moral culpability. It's people who give away their responsibility like this. That's first and foremost whose blame and fault it is. And secondary, you know whose fault it is? People who won't step up into the role of teaching true morality to other people. It's your fault as well. And that's most of my listenership. Most of my viewership. Still has not come forward to do the great work. You're absorbing and absorbing and absorbing and absorbing, and you're doing absolutely no fucking right action with it. You're doing no right action with it. And that's the problem. This isn't about absorbing data or knowledge or watching me every week. This is about putting information out to the public and reaching other people. I talked about years ago, we need a campaign, getting people to quit the cult. Quit your cult campaign. Quit your cult or be cut off. How about that as a name for it? Quit your cult or be cut off. And this is family members have to reach out to people in the positions of order following and say, I'm going to give you this information over the period of 6 months to a year. And after that time, I will have nothing to do with you as a human being. Whether I'm your daughter, your father, your mother, your cousin, your aunt, uncle, sister, brother, wife, husband, anything, child, that's it. I recommended this a couple of years back. And I think that should be the name of it. Quit your cult or be cut off. That's it. Quityourcult.com forwards to what on earth is happening. Just briefly, as an aside, I just registered markpassio.com, finally, after all these years. That redirects to what on earth is happening. If you don't want to type the whole name, WOEIH redirects to what on earth is happening.com. These are all .com. Quityourcult.com, markpassio.com, WOEIH.com are redirects to what on earth is happening. But we should do a campaign somewhere, whether on the One Great Work Network, on social media, or here on What on Earth is Happening, called Quit Your Cult or Be Cut Off. Okay? Where we have family members and associates and friends and all kinds of connections to order followers, tell them, I recognize the immorality of what you are doing, and if you don't stop within a certain amount of time, I'm going to continue to give you information in the form of links, videos, books, documents, etc., to get you awakened to the immorality of what you do and the immoral institution that you are a member of, a cult member of. And if you do not cease and desist in your complicity with this cult, I will have nothing to do with you as a human being. And I think that should mean full divorce and full custody of children. I think that should mean cutting people out of wills and saying nothing in monetary resources or physical resources will be left to you if you are my descendant or heir. We need to take it even into those realms. Hurt them financially if you can. This is a war, and we need to pull out all the stops in this war. That's what I'm proposing as a campaign, and I think somebody should start it, or, we should start it here as an ancillary project and see who picks up the ball and runs with it. Because I talked about it enough, and we really haven't done much with it. I talked about this all the way back from Free Your Mind 4 when I gave my presentation called The Cult of Ultimate Evil, Order Followers, and the Destruction of the Sacred Feminine. So that's the campaign name. That's what I decided on. Quit your cult or be cut off. I think it's a great name, and it expresses the entire dynamic in a few words. So let's see what we can do to get that started. This order following class in the police has no connection whatsoever to any true personal power or creativity in their lives. They have no internal sense of personal power or personal creativity in their lives. That's why they want to control. This is what bullies and controllers and racists all have in their lives. They have no true internal sense of self-worth and true internal sense of power and creativity. They've never engaged in that dynamic for a second in their lives. They're not creators. They have no connection to the creator through the dynamic of creativity in their lives. That they've never made any project on their own. They've never engaged in artwork or music. All they have, because they have no imagination and they have very low intelligence levels, is physical strength. And so they try to put that to work toward controlling other people and think that fulfills some role in society. No, it doesn't. That role is not really needed in society in the way you think it is. Even if you think society would fall into collapse and violence and chaos, it's already there. You just don't see it. It's there in a different form as you imagine it would. And guess what? The way you imagine it would fall into chaos would be preferable to the chaos that we're in now. Far preferable, which I'm going to explain as part of this psychological breakdown in this presentation. So these people don't have any connection to what gives you a true sense of internal power, which is creativity in your life. They don't engage in that dynamic in their life. That's why their brains are burnt and destroyed, because all they do is chase adrenaline. And that's what destroys the limbic brain, and that's a big connection to holistic intelligence and creativity, because it's very connected to the right brain hemisphere, which truly governs all those human dynamics of creativity and imagination and intuition. And that's why these people are so terrible at those human dynamics. Folks, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. I've studied it the bulk of my life. And I'm not going to be told how it works by know-nothings. See, this whole thing that I know nothing, that's a bullshit crock of shit. New age crock of shit. I know a considerable amount. And I'm not afraid to say that I know what I know, because I know it. You want to say that's egotistic? You go right the fuck ahead and say it's egotistic. I'm not going to say that I'm ignorant or I don't know anything, because there's an infinite amount of knowledge to be had. Who gives a fuck? It's a non sequitur logical, inaccurate logical argument. It's a logical fallacy just because there's an infinite amount of knowledge that you know nothing. No, there's an infinite amount of knowledge, and I didn't make a statement regarding how much percentage-wise I know. I still know a considerable amount for a human being. And what I know is true. That's why it's called knowledge and not an opinion or a perception of it. I have quite an amount of considerable true knowledge that I've taken into myself, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And I'm not going to have false hubris and say that I know nothing. Fuck that. That's New Age garbage. I know quite a bit, and I'm not going to be told what I know or don't know by someone else. And I know how these dynamics work because I've studied it endlessly. I've studied it with such total commitment, like a hermit, that it is, again, I've said in the past, it's almost frightening, the level of tenacity and completeness with which I've studied it. You don't know the amount of work I've done to study these dynamics and how completely I understand them. I'm not going to apologize for what I know and say that I know nothing. Fuck that false New Age bullshit false humility, I should say. It's New Age bullshit false humility. I know quite a bit. And nobody should be afraid to say that they know something if it's true that they know it. So these sick order-following police have multiple deep-seated psychological inferiority complexes, both real inferiority complexes and perceived ones. That means that they know that they're inferior in ways that are actually real and measurable, and they have other perceived inferiority complexes in which they just don't have any real true self-confidence, and they think that they are unworthy in certain aspects that may be even an imagination and invention of their own internal psychological framework and mentality, when in fact they're not really truly inferior in those ways, but they just don't have any real self-confidence because they're such self-loathing self-haters deep down inside themselves. That's why they gravitate toward a position of controlling others and getting approval from the proxy mommy and proxy daddy. So we're going to look at ways that they have inferiority complexes. You know, first of all, they know how dumb they are deep down inside. That's why most people who are cops did terribly in school, even in just general left brain intellect ways. They're usually horrific at math, horrific at science. Again, you could say some detectives, etc., who are higher up in the police forces have a little bit more left brain intelligence from an intellect point of view with math and science. But the average rank and file order follower is extremely unintelligent in even just IQ measure of intelligence, let alone holistic intelligence. And they know this deep down inside. They know that they're not very smart people. That's why they gravitated toward an institution based in control and physical violence, because they feel like that's all that they would ever be good at. How about trying to play an instrument? How about trying to work on some artwork? Go, download Adobe Creative Suite or Photoshop, and pay the subscription fee and just try to work on your art skills. Maybe you're good with a pen or a brush. Draw or paint. Do some pottery. Pick up a guitar. Learn piano. Learn keyboard. Play some drums if you want to beat on something instead of beating on somebody's head with a billy club. There's tons of other creative options that you could explore, internal psychological frameworks through, rather than have to try to be a controller of others, which is never going to work to transform society for the better anyway, as we're going to talk about. A lot of them feel like they don't have any connection to other people through their personality, their sexuality, etc. So they feel inferior in simple personality traits and connections to other people. A lot of them know that they're psychopaths, either secondarily or deep down inside, because of some type of trauma that they experience psychologically in their life. And so they just want to continue the trauma victim cycle and take it out on other people and become the trauma creator. These are all the internal dynamics psychologically that's going on within police. That's why they gravitate toward an institution based in violence and coercion. And that's what they do. They attempt to compensate for their inferiority complexes by controlling others. It's the perpetuation of the trauma victim cycle, which we talked about on What on Earth is Happening in the past. trauma gets created in someone's life by a abuser, and then they either identify with the abuser or with the victim role. And then they either become the next abuser or they continue the cycle as the next victim and allow themselves to be abused. The only way of breaking that cycle is with true self-respect and a higher level of consciousness by working through the trauma, not burying it down inside, facing it and working through it. You think I haven't been through my share of trauma in my life? And it's an ongoing battle. You deal with it every day. I feel like I'm traumatized every week putting this show together, quite frankly. You know? But do I deal with it? I force myself to look at it and deal with it and power through it because it's moral obligation to do the work. Do I like it? No. But do I deal with it and persist and power through it? Yes. I think dealing with the ignorance of this society is a trauma. People asked me in the question and answer session of the conference from Spain recently, how do you deal with all the ignorance? Doesn't that create anger and trauma inside of you? And I said, I deal with it very badly. Yes, it does. And do I think that I should be in a state of, total forgiveness and total ignorance I can't remember how some false Buddhist word it. They say, dealing with the ignorance of others is eternal tolerance for someone else's cognitive dissonance. We should never be in that mind state, folks. The emotion of anger is there to be felt. It's there to be felt so you realize how wrong the fucking thing that we're dealing with is and to do something to change it and make it right. That's the adult way of dealing with it. The problem is we have a society where so few people are psychological adults and they've bought into so much bullshit new age nonsense that we're not actually dealing with it. We're paying lip service that we're dealing with it. We're not actually changing anybody else's mentality. Because people think, it's only internal work. Wrong. It's not just internal work. Internal work comes first, but it's about influencing others. It's internal and external alchemy, not just internal. Because if you're not an influencer of someone else's internal work, you're not doing your job as an influencer and teacher of the great work. What do you think? I'm not still doing internal and external work? Both of those processes have to continue indefinitely. You don't just say, I'm done my internal work. And you certainly don't say, it's only internal work. No, incorrect. New age bullshit belief system. So let's look at the second side of these characteristics of all police. The second category psychologically of police officers are the psychopaths. Oh, these are just lovely people. And they're all over. They're all over every department in the world. Don't try to say it's just some. It's a good percentage. In the police, I'd say you probably have about 50%, if not more, are psychopaths to one degree or another or on their way to becoming psychopaths. And I might be being generous. It might be far more than that percentage-wise, but I'm going to put it at least 50%. And we did whole shows on this lovely breed of people. The psychopaths of our world. We've done whole shows on these psychological dynamics. So go back and listen to them in depth with slides. There's whole shows on this in the What on Earth is Happening podcast archive. The characteristics of psychopaths. Aggressive and callous behavior. Now just listen to all of this when it comes to the police. See how much it's describing. Complete absence of conscience and empathy. Or in other words, an internal death of emotion in their own psychological makeup. That's why they have no true holistic intelligence, because most of them have deadened emotion. And by the way, 40% of all police, it's proven in peer-reviewed studies, are domestic abusers. And that's probably a low figure. Proven over and over again in psychological studies that over 40% of all police officers worldwide abuse their spouses, whether they are male or female. Just think about that dynamic by itself without even going into all the rest of their characteristics psychologically. 40% of them are spouse beaters. Okay? Husband beaters or wife beaters. Obviously, mostly wife beaters, but it works the other way too. They are willing to engage in immoral criminal conduct to intentionally violate the inherent rights of other human beings. Sound familiar? All psychopaths are willing to do this. Willing to use intimidation and violence to dominate and control others. That's the police's job on its face. Complete absence of any sense of guilt or remorse for the harm their actions cause to others. I can vouch for this personally from secondhand experience of talking to someone who was a dispatcher for the Philadelphia, or it might have been a Philadelphia area surrounding police department. Once again, I'm still looking for that person. I have lost their contact details. I'm going to just say it again, probably be the last week. Maybe next week I'll ask for them one more time. It is a male person. I don't know if they want their name said on the air, so I won't do that. And we talked several times at meetings of Truth, Freedom, Prosperity here in Philadelphia when they were hosted by Mike, myself, Fernando, and other people, Scott, others. He was a colleague and acquaintance. I wouldn't say that we developed any kind of a deep friendship, but we spoke a few times, and at one luncheon of Truth, Freedom, Prosperity, or it might have been a dinner, he told me about his work as a police dispatcher and told me about the violence that police did to people, gleefully did, with zero remorse, knowingly harming people and knowingly treading all over their rights and usurping their rights. And mostly what he got into telling me were the horrific and incredibly profoundly saddening and maddening acts that these police were these psychopathic police were doing to animals, particularly dogs. Deliberately murdering animals in people's homes when they knew they posed no threat to them and could not wait to get on the next no-knock raid so that they can go and kill more innocent life. So if the person is listening, I can't make you come on the show, obviously. I can only put my intent. I would like you to courageously come out and tell people what you personally heard as a dispatch officer from police's lips to your ears, if you'd be willing to do that. Once again, that is your choice, and you would have to develop that internal courage to do so. But if you're listening, or anybody else who knows who I'm talking about is listening, please get in touch with my assistant Leah, and she'll bring you onto the show. Okay, we'll bring you onto the show for a full interview. You could have as much time as you need to lay it all out. I'll give you the floor. Okay? So I've said my piece on that. Let's go back to the slides. And these people are guiltless and remorseless. And more so, you know what's making them more like that? That they're not being held accountable individually for the crimes that they commit. That's called qualified immunity in policing here in the United States and in other countries. Look it up. It's called qualified immunity. This means that police are no longer being able to be held legally or personally or morally accountable for their behavior. We are creating a whole class of people that can commit crimes with impunity. Let me say that again. We have created an entire class of human beings that can commit crimes with legal immunity and impunity, meaning that they will go unpunished according to any legal system. Do you know how dangerous of a precedent that is? It's called qualified immunity. And it exists in almost every state, if not every state in the United States, and at a federal level. It is criminal on its face to have ever even proposed such, quote, legislation or to have voted it in. Every person who ever did that is a criminal, and a violent criminal themselves. And they should be held physically accountable for even trying to dare do such a thing. Psychopaths will deny, abdicate, and rationalize their own immoral behavior. In other words, they accept no responsibility. And in condoning that behavior, their supporters have accepted no responsibility either, no ability to respond to their immoral behavior. Most psychopaths, if not all psychopaths, are very well practiced pathological liars. And police lie continuously to people. As a matter of fact, it's part of their job description to lie to people. And it is told that they are allowed to lie to people outright and openly. And people think that that's fine. And they have total immunity for doing that as well. Psychopaths are very skilled at faking normal human emotions. They are very skilled at feigning or faking a normal range of human emotions because they have to put on that mask and pretend that they have emotions like everybody else, even though they don't feel like everybody else. They have no emotions for empathy or the any kind of feeling toward what their behaviors, the harm that their behaviors and suffering and trauma that their behaviors cause and initiate. Psychopaths have become very adept and skilled at manipulating other people. They practice manipulation skill sets, literally practice them to appear normal in the eyes of other people, even though they're really internally monsters psychologically. And they believe in their own internal psychological dynamic and framework that they will never be brought to justice, that they can continue to conduct their crimes forever unpunished, that their immoral criminal actions will never be punished. They will never be punished for them. That's what a psychopath thinks. Now, every single one of these characteristics meets the psychological dynamics and characteristics of almost every cop. And if you don't think so, look, I honestly don't even want to hear it. You're a very dumb and naive person if you don't agree with that statement. You are a panderer and a bootlicker to police, and I don't care whether you know them personally. I'll look you in the face and tell you I don't give a shit whether your father's a cop. I don't give a shit whether your mother's a cop. I don't give a shit whether your cousin, your sister, your daughter, your aunt, your uncle, your niece, your nephew. I don't give a fuck what relation you have to them. You're a know-nothing, naive person if you don't understand that these are the psychological characteristics of all police in one form or another, on one side of that column or another, whether they're order followers or psychopaths or a combination of both. Put the slide back up. Look at this chart. Police are one or the other, or a mixture of these psychological characteristics in their internal psychological makeup. The end for all time. Get as offended as you like. This is the garbage that is attracted to this institution. If you don't like it, it doesn't make a difference. It's true and you're wrong. Let me just say that once again to just let's make it very confrontational. If you don't like that statement, you're wrong and it's still true. You got to work through your incorrectness, because your incorrectness is preventing you from understanding rights, because being wrong makes you behave wrongly. See, correct behavior, correct understanding leads to moral behavior. Incorrect understanding leads to immoral behavior. That's why it's called right and wrong in both respects. You have to be right to behave rightly. And if you're wrong, you're going to behave wrongly or immorally. And this is what people have to understand. Being correct when it comes to rights and what's going on in the world leads to right action, or in other words, moral behavior. Being wrong or incorrect in what you understand about psychology and philosophy and what's going on in our world leads one, and leads eventually all society, to be wrong in their assessment of what behavior is, what right and wrong behavior is, and it leads eventually to wrong or immoral behavior. So it is all, people say, oh, don't worry about being right. It's all about being right. It's all about whether you're correct or not. We've been taught this bullshit for far too long, that it isn't about what you know to be right, as in correct. Yes, it is entirely about whether you are correct or not. They'll be like, oh, don't fight other people and try to be right. No, the only dynamic that matters is whether you are correct, whether you are right. It's the same bullshit when people say, oh, it doesn't matter who started a physical altercation. Yes, it does. That's all that matters. All that matters is who initiated the violence. Because the response to physical violence is defensive use of force. It's not more violence. If someone punches me on the street when I've done nothing to harm anybody else, and I punched them back, 2 acts of violence did not occur. Only one did. The one that initiated the harm, which was the person throwing the punch at me. And too few people understand that. because they don't understand self-defense. And that's a big part of what we're going to continue to talk about. So let's move on. Those are the psychological dynamics of police, whether they happen to be order followers or psychopaths. And these are the two kinds of people who are police. The only kind of people that have moved on toward not being in these two groups of people psychologically are those who have quit this cult. And let's stop calling it any other euphemisms. Okay? Let's call it what it is. It's a fucking cult. And these are the two types of cult members that join the police forces anywhere in the world, no matter what country, no matter what municipality, it's all a cult. That's what it is. It's a satanic cult, believe it or not. Whether you understand that or not, it's actually irrelevant. That is the truth as well. Police are all members of a worldwide satanic cult. Doesn't matter whether you don't understand that, whether you're hearing it for the first time and you think it's over the top. It is true nonetheless, regardless of what you think of that statement. And if you don't acknowledge it, I'm just telling you, you are incorrect and wrong. That is the eternal, unwavering truth that can never be made unso. I am correct about it. I don't believe that I'm correct about it. I actually am correct about it. And you could say that's ego all you fucking want. And it will never make the statement I have made regarding that untrue. If you don't understand it or agree with it, you're just fucking wrong. Get as offended as you like. I'm here to create disharmony and that discord emotionally and vibrationally between the people who double down in their ego and insist that they're right when they're wrong. That's what bringing a sword to the world means. That's what it means. Like the allegory of Christ in the New Testament, I have not come here to bring peace to the earth. I've come to bring a sword. And that's what it means. It's not about talking nicely to people. It's not about infecting them with sweet tones like the bullshit, lying, fake whore fucking media does. Truth doesn't need to be deceptive and sneak itself in through the back door. I'm telling you right to your face. There's a way things actually are, and there's alignment to that through your own perception. And if you don't do it, you're wrong. And you're going to behave wrongly as a result. So that is the psychological dynamic of all police. Whether you like it or don't like it, tough fucking shit.